Jeb Carraway hadn't seen another living soul in 4 days. The sun punished the earth like it bore a personal grudge, and the only company he kept was the skeletal wind and the buzzards gliding overhead. His horse, Amos, staggered with each step, ribs visible beneath dusty skin, hooves cracking from the heat. The canteen at Jeb's side barely sloshed now. 1 swallow left, maybe 2 if he was careful. But he wasn't. The land was dying, or maybe it already had. Sand spread out like a shroud across hills and dry riverbeds. Each step forward felt like sinking deeper into a grave. Still, Jeb pressed on, revolver at his hip, eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his sweat-stained hat. He didn't know where he was going exactly. South, maybe. Away from El Paso, away from the blood and the fire and the betrayal, away from what he'd done, but the desert didn't care. It swallowed sins like it swallowed bones. Before we dive deeper into Jeb's journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's more to this story than dust and silence, and you won't want to miss what's coming. A lone tumbleweed scuttled across the path ahead, like even it was trying to escape. Jeb nudged Amos forward with a weak click of his tongue. The horse obeyed, barely. They hadn't eaten in 2 days. Jeb figured they wouldn't need to, much longer. As he crested a ridge, he paused. Below, nothing but flatness. No trees, no rivers, no towns. Just the long hush of the wasteland. He leaned forward, whispering to Amos, "Just a little more, old boy. We'll find water or a grave." He didn't expect an answer, but the wind shifted, carrying something strange, something that wasn't sand or silence, a sound, a whisper, a footstep. Jeb froze, hand drifting to his revolver. From the corner of his eye he caught movement. Not an animal, not a shadow. A figure, small, staggering, barely upright, emerged from the shimmering heat like a ghost. As it came closer, details sharpened in the bleached light, tattered white lace, dirt-streaked veil, bare feet torn and bleeding. A bride. She moved, as if pulled by invisible strings, her head low, arms slack at her sides. Jeb watched, heart thudding, mouth dry. Her eyes locked on his, dull, hollow, unreadable. "Water," she said, voice like broken glass. She collapsed. Jeb hesitated. Could have been a trick, could be a setup. But instinct moved him. He dismounted, knelt beside her, uncorked the last of the canteen, tilted it to her lips. She drank like she hadn't in weeks. Then her eyes fluttered open. "My name's Jeb," he said softly. She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, "Keep riding." "They're coming." The wind rose again, and Jeb, for the first time in a long while, felt cold. She didn't speak again for miles. Jeb helped her onto Amos, cradling her weight as gently as his worn arms allowed. She was too light, her bones too sharp under his hands, as if starvation had hollowed her from the inside. He walked beside the horse, leading them eastward without knowing why, just that going back was no longer an option. The silence stretched between them like barbed wire. Jeb threw glances her way, but she kept her gaze fixed ahead, her wedding dress torn and fluttering in the wind. The veil had slipped back, revealing sunburned cheeks and lips cracked from thirst. Her hair was tangled with twigs and dust, but beneath the grime something strange clung to her, something unbroken. Hours passed. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows over the ridges. Jeb's legs ached, and his stomach gnawed with emptiness, but he dared not ask her to ride alone. He needed to be on the ground, to feel the earth, to stay sharp. Finally she spoke. "Elsie," she said, barely above a whisper. He turned his head. "Elsie?" "My name." "Elsie," he repeated, like trying on a word that didn't quite fit the world they were in. She nodded slowly, then silence again. At dusk they stopped. No fire, just cold beans from a tin Jeb had forgotten in his saddlebag. He offered her half. She accepted without a word. "Where you from?" he asked. She chewed slowly, eyes on the horizon. "A place that don't exist anymore." He waited for more. None came. Night fell like a curtain. The stars blinked to life, scattered across the sky like spilled gunpowder. Jeb rolled out his blanket. Elsie sat cross-legged, arms around her knees, the veil draped over her shoulders like a shawl. She hadn't asked for comfort, and Jeb didn't offer it. But he kept his revolver close. When the coyotes howled, she didn't flinch. When the wind kicked up, she just closed her eyes. "You got folks looking for you?" he asked. Her eyes opened slowly, shining faintly in the moonlight. No one left. Jeb nodded, though he didn't know why. Maybe it was the way she said it, like it was a fact, not a tragedy. She looked at him then, really looked. "Why'd you help me?" Jeb didn't answer right away. "Couldn't just leave you there." "You could have," she said plainly. "Most would have." He shrugged. "Ain't most." For the first time, something flickered in her expression, curiosity maybe, or pity. Then she turned her head and whispered, "Keep moving by morning." Jeb stared at her for a long time, the embers of old instincts flaring in his gut. "Why?" he asked. She didn't answer, just lay back, eyes open to the sky, like she was listening for something only she could hear. And in the hush that followed, Jeb realized he was listening too. By mid-morning, the land began to change. The cracked flatness gave way to jagged rocks and forgotten trails. A line of splintered fence posts jutted from the earth like broken teeth, leading nowhere. Jeb followed them, unsure why, until the silhouette of weather-beaten buildings appeared in the distance. Half-sunken, half-defiant, Dry Valley. The sign hung crooked over the road, letters nearly stripped by time. No smoke, no sounds, just wind weaving through wooden slats and shattered glass. Jeb helped Elsie down from Amos. She said nothing, but her eyes narrowed as she took in the place. Her fingers clenched the veil tighter around her shoulders. "You know this town?" Jeb asked. Her pause was too long. "No," she said finally. He didn't believe her. They stepped carefully, boots crunching over debris and dead leaves. The saloon's doors were half gone, swinging limply in the breeze. Inside, broken stools lay in splinters, and a piano sat in the corner, keys yellowed, silent. Then the wind shifted, pressing through the cracks. The piano played one note, just one. Jeb's hand went to his gun. Elsie didn't flinch. She stared at the keys, unmoving. "Wind," she whispered, as if trying to convince herself. They passed the old general store. Shelves bare, floor scattered with rusted tools and rat bones. The church sat at the far end of town, still intact. Its white paint peeled like dead skin, but the bell tower stood proud. Cross steady, door open. Inside, dust hung in the air like smoke. Pews lined up in crooked rows. A Bible on the pulpit lay open to a page torn at the corner. Elsie walked ahead, tracing her fingers along the wood. "Why's this place empty?" Jeb asked aloud, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. "People left," she said softly. "Some fled. Some didn't." Jeb scanned the space. Symbols scratched into the altar. Candles burned down to nubs. He noticed a dark stain on the floor near the first pew, dried long ago. Not wine. Out back, they found the cemetery. Wooden markers leaned with age, some with names, others blank. Jeb squinted at one that had almost faded. His breath caught. "Hiram Caraway." His brother. He staggered back. "That ain't possible. Hiram died in Arizona, not—" Elsie stared at the marker, unmoved. Jeb ran to the next. Sarah B. Caraway. His mother. A third. Nathaniel Caraway. His father. He turned to her, face pale. "What is this?" Elsie's gaze didn't waver. A place people forget. A place that doesn't let go. Jeb's hands trembled. The air felt thicker, like breathing through wet cloth. He wanted to ride. Leave. But Amos stood at the edge of town, unmoving, ears flat. Elsie walked back toward the church, her veil lifting behind her like a banner. She didn't look back, and Jeb, despite everything inside him screaming to run, followed her into the hollow heart of Dry Valley. Night fell over Dry Valley like a shroud. Inside the church, Elsie knelt where the moonlight spilled across the altar. Her hands were folded, lips moving in a prayer too quiet for Jeb to catch. He leaned against a pew, arms crossed, thoughts buzzing like flies. The graveyard still haunted his vision. The names, his family, buried here, it made no sense. Hiram died in a bar fight 3 states over. His ma passed during a fever in a mining camp. This place wasn't part of their story, wasn't supposed to be. "You gonna tell me what this is?" he asked. Elsie finished her prayer, then stood. "I was to be married," she said, voice steady. "Here, in this church." Jeb's breath caught, not because of what she said, but how she said it, like the words had rusted from disuse. "The whole town came," she continued. "It was spring. The preacher was late. The sky turned red." She paused, eyes unfocused. "By sundown, the streets ran black. My groom never showed. The bells never rang." "What happened?" Jeb asked quietly. "They disappeared," she said. "All of them, everyone." Jeb frowned. "Disappeared how?" "Like dust in the wind," she whispered. "Like they never were." He rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of it. "You're saying the whole town just vanished?" "I stayed," she said. "I waited. Days, then weeks. Something kept me here." Jeb stared at her, unsure if she was mad or haunted, or both. But something about the way she spoke, the clarity in her pain, struck deeper than fear. "You believe in curses?" she asked suddenly. "No," Jeb said too quickly. "Maybe you should." They sat in silence, each grappling with ghosts. Jeb thought of the men he'd killed, the banks he'd robbed, the lies he'd told. Maybe he'd been cursed long before this town. "You ain't told me your story," Elsie said. He snorted. "Ain't much to tell." "Try me," he hesitated, then let the words spill. "My pa was a farmer. Fair man. Deputies took him in for something he didn't do. Died in jail. I was 12. Elsie listened, unmoving. "I made a promise. That I'd make the law bleed," he said. "Turned to crime. Got good at it. Too good." "And now?" "Now?" he echoed. "Now I'm alone. My gang turned on me. Got a bounty so big even the buzzards know my name." Elsie nodded slowly. "You're running." He looked at her. "Aren't you?" Their eyes locked. For once, no lies passed between them. Later, under the cracked ceiling, they lay side by side on cold wood. She hummed a hymn he didn't recognize. Soft, trembling. He didn't ask for the words. Jeb stared at the rafters, mind restless. She was no ghost, but she wasn't just a girl either. Something bound her to this place, and somehow now it was binding him too. Jeb woke with a jolt. The fire was out. The church was darker than before, shadows stretching longer than they should in the silver light of dawn. He reached instinctively for his revolver, cold metal still there. But the air felt wrong. He stepped outside. The wind had shifted. Softer now. But in the dirt outside the church, fresh hoofprints circled their camp. Deep. Heavy. 5 or 6 horses, maybe more, but no riders in sight. He crouched, fingers brushing the tracks. They hadn't heard a thing. Behind him, Elsie stood in the doorway, barefoot again. Her eyes locked on the prints. "They've come," she said. Jeb stood. "Who?" She didn't answer. She just turned and walked back into the church. He followed, heart thumping louder than his boots on the floorboards. "Elsie, talk to me." She sat at the front pew, head bowed. "I told you, this place doesn't let go, and neither do they." "You're talking in riddles." She looked up then. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight. "You feel it, don't you? That pressure, like the air ain't real." He swallowed. "I feel something." "They don't ride like men," she said. "They ride like memory." Jeb frowned. "Memories don't leave tracks." Elsie tilted her head. "Are you sure?" He turned away, rubbing his face. He was a man of bullets and bone, not superstition. But the town, the graves, the way his own past had resurfaced here like it had been waiting, all of it whispered things he didn't know how to answer. That night they didn't speak much. Jeb cleaned his gun twice. Elsie lit candles in the corners of the church, though the wind kept snuffing them out. "You ever feel like you're being watched?" he asked. "All the time," she said. They didn't sleep. Every creak made Jeb reach for his revolver. Once, around midnight, he swore he heard boots on the porch. When he opened the door, the dust swirled empty. By morning, he looked like a man halfway between outlaw and ghost. "You can still leave," Elsie said. He met her eyes. "And leave you here?" She didn't answer. He nodded toward the door. "You ever try?" She shook her head. "They always pull me back, no matter how far I go." Jeb stepped toward her. "Then maybe we ride together, harder, farther." "You don't understand," she whispered. "This town isn't just a place." He waited. "It's a debt." Jeb studied her face, the cracks behind her strength. He saw something now. Fear, yes, but also shame, like whatever held her here she'd invited once. He didn't ask more, not yet. Outside, the wind howled again. The prince had vanished, swept clean. But in his chest, that cold feeling grew heavier. Jeb didn't believe in ghosts. But he was beginning to believe in something worse. They came at noon. The sun burned overhead, merciless, casting warped shadows through the broken buildings of Dry Valley. Jeb was on the church roof, scanning the horizon, when he spotted them, 5 riders cutting across the plain like dark blades slicing through dust. He climbed down, landing with a grunt. "We've got company." Elsie stood by the altar, already still, like she'd known. They emerged from the heat shimmer one by one. No words, no greetings. Just dust-choked silence and the sound of hooves on cracked earth. Jeb stepped into the open. He kept his revolver at his side, thumb grazing the hammer. His breath was slow, deliberate. He squinted against the sun. The lead rider pulled up. His horse was black as coal, its eyes as flat as death. The man atop it wore a broad-brimmed hat and a coat stained with things Jeb didn't want to name. Jeb's stomach twisted. Mateo Vargas, once his partner, once his brother in blood and betrayal, thought dead after the heist in Juarez, buried under 2 feet of rubble and flame. "You look like hell," Jeb said. Mateo grinned. "You always had a way with compliments." The other riders spread out, silent, masked, eyes hollow. Something unnatural rode with them, not just menace, absence, as if the light bent away from their bodies. "You ain't real," Jeb muttered. Mateo chuckled. "More real than most things in this world, brother." Elsie appeared behind Jeb, veil fluttering. Mateo's grin widened. "There she is," he said. "The bride of the bargain." Jeb stepped between them. "You ain't taken her." Mateo tilted his head. "It ain't up to you. Debt has to be paid." "She owes you nothing." "You sure about that?" Jeb gritted his teeth. "You sold your soul a long time ago, Mateo. Don't drag her into it." Mateo dismounted with eerie ease, boots landing soundless. He walked forward, calm as a preacher, and stopped just short of Jeb. "You know how this works," he said. "You can fight, but the sun still sets, and when it does, we collect." Jeb drew his revolver, slow and deliberate. "Then you better come early." For a moment the world held its breath. Then Mateo laughed, deep and ugly. "You got till dawn, Caraway. Spend it how you want. Pray run, load your gun, but when the sky bleeds, she's ours." He turned, remounted, and rode away, the others behind him. No dust cloud rose, no tracks were left behind. Jeb stood frozen. Elsie walked to his side, voice trembling. "He's part of it now. He made himself into one of them." "What bargain did you make?" Jeb asked, without looking at her. Elsie didn't answer. He stared at the empty horizon. "Then we wait." She shook her head slowly. "No," she said, "we prepare." They boarded the doors just before dusk. Jeb moved with a purpose he hadn't felt in years. Nails between his teeth, hammer in hand, he sealed every crack he could find. Elsie lit the remaining candles, her hands steady despite the fading light. The church glowed faintly, like a dying lantern fighting against the dark. "They always come after sundown," she said. Jeb didn't ask how she knew. He believed her now. She handed him a box. Inside, 6 bullets. Fresh, polished, not his. "Where'd you get these?" he asked. "They belonged to my father." He loaded them one by one. As he sat to clean his rifle, Elsie moved beside him. Her veil had been folded and set aside. Her face was bare now, gaunt, tired but fierce, stronger than before. "You were going to marry here," Jeb said. "Was he a good man?" She didn't speak for a long while. "He loved me," she said, "but he was afraid." When the men came to take what wasn't theirs, he made the deal. Jeb stopped cleaning. What kind of deal? They promised the town would be spared, she said, that he'd live, that our children would grow in peace. And? They lied. Jeb stood and walked to the pulpit. His knuckles were white on the wood. Did you know Mateo? He asked. She shook her head. Not before, but I've seen him in my dreams since. He made his own bargain, didn't he? Same as me, Jeb muttered. He chose the path of blood. Elsie stepped forward. You didn't choose it. You survived it. He looked at her. Ain't much difference. She reached down and picked up the revolver he'd set aside, held it like she'd done it before. I want you to teach me. Jeb blinked. What? To shoot, she said. To fight. I won't run anymore. He hesitated, then nodded. They practiced in silence. Aimed at pew legs, broken glass, the walls already scarred by time. Her hands shook at first, then steadied. By the time the sky turned black, she hit what she aimed for. Later, as they sat behind the altar, Jeb lit one last cigarette. You scared? He asked. Yes, she whispered. But not of them, not anymore. He nodded. Me neither. Outside, the wind had stilled. The kind of silence that comes before a storm. You think we can stop them? She asked. No, Jeb said, but I think we can make 'em bleed trying. She almost smiled. When the first bell tolled, though no one had touched the rope, they didn't flinch. They were ready. The first shot cracked before the sun broke the horizon. Jeb was already crouched behind the pulpit, revolver drawn. Elsie lay prone beneath a shattered window, her breathing calm, finger steady on the trigger of the rifle he'd handed her hours before. They came from the east, shadows on horseback, riding low and silent, like death with saddles. The church doors shook. Wood groaned. Then shattered. Jeb fired. The first rider fell, chest split open. No scream. Just collapse. The others scattered, moving faster than men should. One leapt through the broken window, boots slamming against the pews. Elsie didn't hesitate. One clean shot, shoulder to heart. He dropped. She exhaled. Jeb turned as a third rider rushed him, blade raised. No time to shoot. He caught the man with the barrel of his gun, crushed his temple, and kicked him back through the altar. The fourth rider stepped through the doorway, slower than the rest. Mateo. He didn't raise a weapon, just smiled. Thought you'd last longer, he said. Jeb's gun rose. I've got one bullet left, Jeb growled. Mateo's grin widened. Make it count, Jeb fired. The bullet struck him center chest. Mateo stumbled, then laughed. That all? Blood seeped through his shirt, but he kept walking. Elsie rose behind the pews, silent, rifle in hand. Mateo turned too late. Her shot hit him square in the spine. He crumpled. This time, he didn't rise. The final rider, face hidden beneath a veil of ash, charged the front doors. Jeb braced, grabbed a shard of wood from the altar, and threw it like a spear. It struck deep. Silence. Outside, the wind stirred. The sun finally crept over the ridge, light spilling across the church floor in golden sheets. Jeb leaned back against the pulpit, breathing hard. His shirt was soaked with blood. Elsie rushed to him. You're hit, she said. He nodded slowly. Yeah. She knelt beside him, hands trembling now. Where? He lifted his shirt. A dark patch spread over his ribs. Caught me when the first one came through, he whispered. She pressed her hands there, desperate. No, we made it. He smiled. You did. Her eyes brimmed. You're free now, he said. No, she whispered. Not without you. He coughed, blood at the corner of his lips. We never get free, Elsie. We just get a choice. She held his face. What choice? To stop running. His hand found hers, squeezed once, then slipped away. Outside, the horses were gone. The riders vanished. Dry Valley stood quiet for the first time in years. Jeb Carraway didn't move again. Elsie closed his eyes. The morning light caught the edge of her veil, now soaked with dust and blood. She didn't cry. She stood. And somewhere beyond the hills, the wind carried the last echo of his name. Elsie buried him beneath the cross behind the church. The soil was hard, stubborn. She dug with her bare hands when the shovel broke. The morning sun rose higher, unflinching, burning through the sorrow like it wanted to sear it away. But she worked until her knuckles bled, until her fingers were caked with earth, until the grave was deep enough to hold a man who had given everything. She laid his hat over his chest, wrapped him in the remains of the church's altar cloth, then lowered him into the ground. "Jeb Carraway," she said softly, standing over the grave. "You were the only thing in this godless place that felt real." She covered him with the last of the dirt, stone by stone, until the wind fell quiet. No bell tolled, but the silence felt different now, lighter somehow, as if Dry Valley had released its breath. Elsie sat at the grave's edge for hours. She didn't cry. She didn't pray. She just listened. The world had changed. Something had lifted. When she rose, her legs shook, but her eyes were clear. She walked to the saloon, found his satchel. Inside, a small pouch of coins, a folded map, and his old wanted poster. The ink had faded. The bounty now meant nothing. She left it all on the bar, all but the gun. She holstered it. She saddled Amos, his horse now hers, and mounted with quiet resolve. The church bell still hung, rusted and still, behind her. She looked back once, just once, then rode east, not fast, not to escape, but forward, toward whatever came next. Word of her spread long before she reached the next town. Some said she was a ghost, others swore she was the spirit of vengeance made flesh. A few whispered that she was married to the devil himself, riding to settle debts owed across the borderlands. But none of them really knew. They didn't see the way she watched people, careful, measuring. They didn't know the hymn she hummed to herself at night, the one Jeb had heard her sing once in the church, under the cracked roof and broken moonlight. She never told anyone her real name. But those who met her called her the widow of Dry Valley, and none dared cross her. In a town weeks away, she stopped a hanging with a single shot. In another, she ran a corrupt sheriff out under moonlight, always silent, always gone by dawn. She carried no badge, no flag, just dust, steel, and the weight of memory. And behind her, Dry Valley began to vanish from maps again. As if the wind had finally erased it for good. But the grave remained, a cross of splintered wood, a name carved beneath it with a blade. Jeb Carraway, outlaw, brother, protector, the man who chose to stay. Years passed. Dry Valley faded from maps, erased by wind and time. No roads led to it anymore, no riders passed through. But in saloons across the frontier, whispers lingered like smoke. They spoke of her, the ghost bride, the widow in dust, the woman in white. No one could say for sure who she was. Some claimed she walked out of the desert during a storm, face hidden behind a torn veil. Others swore she came from death itself, riding a horse that had once belonged to an outlaw legend. But all agreed on one thing: wherever she went, justice followed. Not law, not vengeance, justice. In a mining town, she exposed a banker who had been burying workers in unmarked graves. In a village near the border, she protected a family from a raiding gang with nothing but a look and a loaded rifle. Her legend grew, but she never stayed. She never spoke more than needed, and she never took payment. One day a boy approached her on the edge of a canyon trail. "You're the widow," he said, breathless, "ain't you?" She looked down from her horse, shadowed under her wide-brimmed hat. "I heard you saved a whole town, killed 5 ghosts with your own hands." She said nothing. The boy shuffled his feet. "Is it true?" After a moment, she dismounted, took a small object from her satchel, a rusted bullet, handed it to him. He looked up in awe. "What's this?" she answered with a quiet voice that cracked like dried wood. The last shot of a man who chose to protect someone he didn't have to. Then she mounted again and rode off. The boy held the bullet for years, carried it into adulthood, told his own children about the bride who walked out of the dust and rewrote what it meant to be free. And far, far away, where no trail reached, where no wind disturbed the old bones of Dry Valley, a single grave remained under an aging cross. The wind still passed through, but it no longer howled. It hummed, a low, soft tune, like a hymn remembered, And in that wind a name lived on, not just hers, but his, Jeb Carraway, the outlaw who found nothing for miles, until he found her. If this story moved you, or if you believe legends still live in the dust of forgotten trails, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next tale. We've got more stories of redemption, sacrifice, and the power of choosing what's right over what's easy. And if you're ready to ride into another unforgettable journey, click the video on your screen now. There's always another path waiting to be walked, even for ghosts.